Sid has mentioned, this morning we're continuing in our discipleship journey. And as we said last time, a disciple is someone who is learning the way of Jesus. You okay? I'll keep going. Hopefully you remember what we said last time. Last month we were introducing, great, thank you, this discipleship square, which is the model of discipleship that was used by Jesus. And we were looking at the first stage at the top there of I do, you watch. In his early ministry, Jesus was doing things that the disciples watched. They were invited to be along with him, and so they were able to watch him at work. As time went on, though, Jesus began to involve his disciples in what he was doing, and so the disciples got to help him. And it was something they got to do. It wasn't something that they had to do. It was a privilege to be able to help Jesus in what he was doing. So this morning, and also continuing on Wednesday evening, we're looking at the second stage in the square of I do and you help. And we're exploring the theme of helping. Thinking about the idea of helping took me back. This picture is affectionately known in my family as the Little Cooks. And it's a photo of me in the front and my big brother Greg in the family kitchen as children. I think my mum's baked a flan and we're merrily decorating it with some fruit slices on the top. And as a child, I enjoyed being in the kitchen and baking with my mum. To be honest, I don't think I was really a very great help to her. I think I was sort of very keen to lick the mixing whisks to taste what she'd made, or eating some of the ingredients that were very tasty. I think she actually had to give me a little Tupperware tub of my own chocolate chips so that I didn't take away from what needed to go into the cakes. But baking wasn't a skill of mine at that young age. And Sid would want to tell you that it still isn't a skill of mine. Or at least he would want to tell you what a mess I make of the kitchen if I attempt any baking. And I'm not sure that Joanne will be asking me to bake any cakes for the cafe anytime soon. So it wasn't that I was good at baking. I wasn't bringing this amazing skill set that my mum needed in the kitchen. It was often quite fairly basic tasks that I would help her with. I think I was okay at crushing the digestive biscuits to make a family recipe called Chocolate Favourite. And at Easter, we would make chocolate Easter nests with little eggs in, and I would crush the shredded wheat that needed to go into those. And obviously my mum could have done that very easily without my help. When we help someone, it isn't always about an amazing skill set that we're bringing or that the other person needs us necessarily. It's often simply about being with one another. And those baking sessions were enjoyable for me because it meant I got to be with my mum, spending time with her and doing something that she was very good at. I can remember going to school and opening up my lunchbox, and my friends would be very envious of my beautiful butterfly buns that mum had made at home, and they'd want to swap with me for their Kit Kat or Penguin, or other chocolate bars are obviously available, but I didn't want to do any swapping because the results of my mum's baking were definitely delicious. Thinking of a more recent example of helping, as many of you may know, my husband Sid is a skilled multi-trader, and those skills are coming in very handy at the moment as we're renovating the church house in Leigh-on-Sea. I think you should be able to just about see in the middle there, he's decorating the hall stairs and landing. Painstakingly, each of the steps have been painted white, ready for the carpet runner. And more recently, he was fitting the kitchen, still with a smile on his face. And the kitchen sink going in was quite a momentous moment for us. We lived without a kitchen sink for a bit too long, I think. So there are times where I've watched Sid when he's been working, as you can see from taking the photographs. But I have to admit that what I enjoy more is when I get to help him. So this is an example of us stripping off the wallpaper in the living room quite early on. And we were actually really pleased that we had lots of wallpaper to strip, and we had some happy volunteers from Leigh-on-Sea Church to come and help us as well. More often than not, Sid will just ask me to hold something or pass him something if he's up a ladder and it's not that convenient to keep getting up and down. I think just this week I was holding a sink up while he was refitting some waste underneath. I don't think that was a particularly pleasant job that he enjoyed, but If there is a wrong way of holding something, then I'll find it. And I won't begin to tell you the stories of when we've had to move furniture together, but suffice to say, Sid has a very practical brain and his instructions make sense in his brain, but somehow they're lost in translation. So actually it takes quite a lot of patience on Sid's part to let me help him. I'm not a skilled labourer to him. But just like when I was in the family kitchen with my mum baking, there's value for me in being alongside Sid as he's working and for us to be able to be together. It's nice for me to feel like I'm helping in what he's doing, even if it's just some small way. Because helping takes us a step forward, doesn't it, from just watching and observing. It involves us somehow in what they're doing and we feel part of it. And we're going to look this morning at the occasion where Jesus feeds the 5,000 and just think about how Jesus enables the disciples to help him. So I'm reading from Matthew 14, starting at verse 31. It should come up on the screen, so if it's a bit smaller. Verse 13, yeah. Jesus feeds the 5,000. When Jesus heard what had happened, and that's the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it is already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. And the number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Jesus has just had the news that his cousin, John the Baptist, has been killed by Herod. And we read in that first verse, verse 13, how in his time of grief, Jesus takes himself away by boat in an effort to withdraw from the crowds. The people follow him. They've seen his boat set sail and they've worked out where he's going to, so they race ahead on foot and they flock in great droves to the other side of the lake. And that's where they are waiting for him when he arrives. Jesus, as we know, is never too busy for people. He never finds people a nuisance or has one eye on the clock and is anxious to get rid of them. And so he returns to the ministry that he has come to do. He has compassion on the people and he heals those who are brought to him. And then the disciples come to Jesus with a problem, quite a practical problem. It's getting late. Everybody needs to have something to eat. And they make a suggestion that Jesus should send everybody away to go and buy some food in the surrounding villages. And this would mean Jesus stopping his healing activity, and presumably those who are still waiting to be healed would not have that touch from him. In verse 16, Jesus tells them, no, this isn't the answer. They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat, he says. You feed them and meet their need here in this place where they are. And what strikes me about this passage is the way the disciples are involved. They're not just watching. They realise that Jesus is actually instructing them to feed this multitude of people. And so they begin complaining to Jesus about how little provision they have. They're quite keen to point out that the available supplies are totally inadequate to cater for so many. We only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. You can always hear them complaining. And they aren't talking about great big loaves as we might know them or large fish. In John's Gospel account, we read that one of the disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, says, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" quite an emphasis on the word small. And what they effectively have is a little boy's lunch, some small bread rolls and small fish. He doesn't have a butterfly bun. It's a luxury that he doesn't have that day. But despite the complaining of the disciples, Jesus, as we know, faithfully multiplies what they bring to him to feed over 5,000 people. And the number of men would have been counted separately to the women, because in the Jewish culture of that day, when they were eating in public, the men would sit separately from the women and children in their family. Jesus performs this miracle. It's Jesus that does the multiplying so that there's enough for everyone to eat. But it is the disciples that distribute the food. We see in verse 19, Jesus first takes the food, looks up to heaven, and he gives thanks. And I read that the form of grace that Jewish families use before meals goes something like this. Blessed art thou, Jehovah our God, King of the universe, who bringest forth bread from the earth. This is a simple acknowledgement in gratitude that all gifts are from God. And after Jesus has done this, he passes the loaves and fish back to his disciples. And then it's the disciples that go around walking amongst the crowd, handing this food out. And they give it to one person after another after another. And before they know what's happening, there is enough for everyone to eat. And I think it's by helping in that food distribution that they actually get to see firsthand the power of Jesus at work. And miraculously, everyone receives plenty to eat. There is more than enough. And then we read that the disciples help by collecting up the baskets of leftover food. Again, by being involved, they get to see firsthand how much is left over. The disciples witness the miracle that Jesus performs in multiplying this small amount of food so that all are satisfied and there are 12 baskets left over. At the same time, they've been actively involved in what Jesus is doing here. They're helping. And Jesus chooses to let them help him. In John's account of this event in John chapter 6, we read that Jesus asked one of his disciples, Philip, to consider a solution to the problem of feeding all the people. And in John 6 verse 6, we read that Jesus was only asking Philip to test him. Jesus already had in mind what he was going to do here. And that word test in Greek, piradzo, shouldn't be read in a negative sense. He's not trying to trip him up or catch him out. He's actually asking Philip with the purpose of just discovering what he thinks and how he will respond to this situation. As Danielle Strickland highlighted to us, Jesus actually asked more questions while he was here on earth than he answered. And he often asked questions to draw people out and to make them think. Take, for example, when he asked his disciples, who do people say I am? And who do you say I am? So Jesus asked the question, where will we get enough bread to feed all these people? Simply to involve and to engage Philip in what he's doing. Jesus is showing Philip and the other disciples that there is no way they can solve this problem on their own. There is no shop close enough to buy the amount of food that would be required, and the disciples would not have had enough money to do so. And so Jesus wants them to learn to trust in him, to know that he alone is able to meet their need. In fact, he's more than able to meet their need, as we see. And notice there are 12 baskets of food left over. Each one of those 12 disciples who had agonized over the shortage of food and complained and looked at the size of the crowd that they were instructed to feed, they walk away with a basket full of extra food. These 12 baskets that are left over bring to my mind the verse in Ephesians. It's in chapter 3, verse 20. It tells us, he is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. So what to the disciples had seemed completely insufficient, when it was placed into Jesus' hands, became more than enough. Nothing is too small for God to use it, even a little boy's lunch. Sid and I have started on the missionary academy with Elim Missions last September, and I can remember the feelings that I had at that time. I knew that God had a calling on our lives and that we were stepping out into his purpose for us. At the same time, quietly in my heart, I questioned how and whether God could use me. I saw myself, I wasn't qualified as a nurse or a teacher. I actually haven't travelled very much. I don't come with any prior experience of cross-cultural mission. And my negative mind was focusing on all of these inadequacies that I felt, thinking what little I had to bring. And I can still remember vividly this feeling of deep reassurance that I had. We had on I think it was a Tuesday or a Thursday evening, we were online and we had a hub together with the others on the academy and with the International Missions Director and the training coordinator, Danielle. And we were discussing together, we read through this book together, which I recommend. It's called The Discipleship Gospel, What Jesus Preached We Must Follow. And it was one of the very first sessions. We were looking at an introductory chapter in this book. And towards the end of that chapter, I read these words. The spread of the gospel will come from ordinary people with the authority of the gospel. The spread of the gospel will come from ordinary people with the authority of the gospel. And it goes on to say, as we hold up the gospel that Jesus preaches, we have power to penetrate every part of society and every corner of the earth. Wow. I can't quite describe the level of encouragement that I felt at that moment as I realised, and I have to say not for the first time in my life, that it wasn't about me at all. It wasn't about what I was bringing to the table. I, like all of us, am a very ordinary person, but I'm a servant of Jesus. I'm helping in his work, and wherever he may call me, I go with his authority. We know, don't we, that Jesus chose really ordinary people to be his disciples, and I find that really encouraging. Pastor Lee reminded us when he introduced our discipleship journey of a verse that we can find in Acts 4, verse 13, which talks about the Jewish leaders of the day. And it says that when they saw the courage of Peter and John, and they realised they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished. And they took note that these men had been with Jesus. And Lee made the point that it's being with Jesus that makes the difference. So as we think about the passage that we read this morning, Jesus was working through the hands of the disciples, and he still does that today. He is looking for people through whom he can act, through whom he can speak. Disciples through whom he can work, and through whom his truth and his love can enter into the lives of others. It's easy, isn't it, to be daunted and discouraged by such a big ask. But I think there's something for us to remember in the story we've read. It should be able to encourage each of us. The disciples told Jesus that all they had was 5 small loaves and 2 small fishes, and they saw what they had as being inadequate to meet the needs of the people. But what they brought to him, what they placed into his hands, Jesus used to perform his miracle. His words there were, bring them here to me. Jesus says, come to me just as you are, however ill-equipped or unqualified you might feel, and bring to me whatever you have, however little, and I will use it greatly in my service. Little is always much when we place it into his hands. We know all things are possible with God.